Hello, thank you for joining us on the Voluntary Virtues Roundtable. My name is Robert Kruger. I'm the guest host tonight. Michael Shanklin will not be with us, unfortunately, but he has promised to jump back in the Voluntary Virtues After Hours later on this evening. Tonight we are going to be discussing some of the news of the day, and we are looking to have Christopher Chase Rachels from the Blue Ridge Freedom Project, or Liberty Project, Blue Ridge Liberty Project, going to be joining us, and we're going to interview him, then see what sort of things that they're doing over there. And if you have any comments or questions that you'd like to ask of our guest or our panel, certainly do comment in the YouTube live hangout, the YouTube live event. We do keep track of that so that we can answer any questions or comments that you might have there. And tonight we have our panel that consists of Cody Limbaugh, Marky Valentine, and Kenji Kenji. So thank you guys for joining, and let's take a look at what some of the things are that we're going to be discussing this evening. Let's see, what do we have going on? Still working on getting our guest on, so let's see. We have a article from thereason.com where a jury freed a man charged with shooting at cops who raided the wrong house. So we actually have some good news here. Any of you guys familiar with this particular article? Have you checked it out?
I haven't got to see it yet. Maybe you could catch us up to speed.
Well, on a fairly regular basis, we'll see cops entering the wrong home while they're trying to dispense with the war on innocent people who happen to have the interest in doing recreational drug use and or selling the products that are used in that particular thing. And basically, KHON2 news outlet did an interview with this particular person, and he heard noises, somebody breaking into his home. Probably wasn't announced, at least in a proper way, that they were police officers. Obviously, people are going to try not to shoot police officers. I don't know necessarily why, but then let's see here. He was charged with a misdemeanor reckless handling of a firearm for the shots fired. After a warning, he at assailants who hadn't identified themselves. His first trial before a judge ended in a guilty verdict, and so he appealed. And the second trial ended in mistrial, and the third trial took place before a jury, where he was found not guilty. They said that he showed restraint by firing one shot, and that police had no business raiding the wrong address. So yeah, the way that the police found the house that they decided to go into was by counting the houses along the street instead of actually looking at the numbers on the sides of the home. So then let's see here. They also thought the laser sight indicators on Watson's chest proved that cops were full of shit when they claimed to have their weapons aimed at the ground, which was their claim that they were not in a threatening fashion, so he had no reason to shoot at them. You're breaking into my freaking home. I don't care if you have your weapons down or not. I'm going to take a shot. So obviously this could have gone worse. We could have had several dead people, but the thing that's really clear and obvious from this is that pulling out guns and going into people's homes in order to try to stop people from pursuing their own entertainment purposes is stupid. It puts people in harm's way. It creates an opportunity for death, and it doesn't work either. And it's none of your business to tell people what they can or cannot put into their own bodies, even if it makes them act recklessly. Until they're acting recklessly in your area where they might injure you or your family or your property, then it's none of your business. If they want to screw up their own lives, if they want to screw up their own property, that's their concern. It's none of your concern. Quite frankly, I don't think that drug use actually does do anywhere near the damage that people claim that it does. I do know that the war on drugs actually does create a lot of harm. A lot of innocent people are hurt. The prices of the products are increased to to insane levels, so that people who are using drugs, who feel some sort of either physiological or psychological addiction affecting them, well, because these drugs are so expensive, they now have little recourse but then to seek crime as an alternative method of funding it, where if these drugs were not illegal, the amount of money necessary to fuel one's habit would be fairly minimal. It's not that hard to grow a weed or to make cocaine out of the coca plant. It's a very easy process. Even crystal meth is actually pretty damn easy to do if you don't have the government breathing down your neck and making everything cost too much. So, in any case, did we have any commentary from the round table here about this particular article, this event, or any similar ones that have occurred in the recent past?
I just had a quick question. Does this guy have a civil claim against whatever jurisdiction did that?
I don't know. I don't know, but I do know that there are laws on the books that say that when a at least there's federal law that says if there is an innocent party whose property is damaged in the process of administering law, that they are supposed to be compensated for the loss. I don't know if that's going to happen in this particular case. When it comes to the government trying to make sure that it abides by its own rules, they kind of do a lackadaisical job of it. So I don't really predict that this guy's going to get compensation for a broken door or for the psychological hardships, for the inconvenience of having to go to trial, all these types of things. I just don't see that really coming to pass. And maybe his loss, if he does do a lawsuit, that he would be able to get something out of it. But my guess is, being that the people who will decide whether the lawsuit is of merit would probably be influenced drastically by the by the government, which it would be the people that he's going to sue. I don't think that you're going to necessarily see a lot of justice come from that. It's kind of hard to sue the people that you're going to be suing in front of. Who's going to hear the case? Cody?
Well, he might have a chance just because one of the things that makes government so terrible is that they know that it's not a personal consequence to them. So, I mean, the judge, it's no skin off the judge's back if he says, oh, well, yeah, you should be compensated. It's not like it's coming out of his pocket. There's no accountability in government, I guess is what I'm saying. So if the guy ends up getting paid off a bit, I guess precedent may be an incentive to not do it, but the government doesn't really, the people who work for the government don't have any personal accountability when it comes to that. So, yeah, I'm just amazed when you're reading the story that this guy is breathing. I mean, you pull a gun on a cop, it's a death sentence. I mean, I'm kind of reeling about the fact that he actually got a shot fired off and isn't a bloody pulp at this point. I'm really curious how this all went down. Is there video of this floating around anywhere? Do you know if anybody released it?
Well, there's obviously video of some sort, because they have footage where the police officers' lasers are on the victim, not the police, but the victim being the person who's the homeowner. He had laser beams on his chest, and apparently I'm kind of shocked that they didn't actually pull the trigger and kill him outright, since he did fire. But yeah, there's some video of some sort. I don't know where it is. It's not referenced on the article. Also, he essentially lost a year of his life due to being incarcerated for the time frame while they're figuring out all this crap, with all these different trials and so on. So how much of a claim would he have as far as financial remuneration for his lost time? I'm thinking $50,000-$60,000 minimum, and then you double that, because that's the standard when it comes to was it common law, is that you typically double the amount of damage done in order to compensate. And let's see, what else happened here? Oh, there was a similar case not too long back. Corey May, he spent 10 years in prison after killing a police officer during a wrong house raid. So, yeah, you break into the wrong house, you're violating somebody's property rights, they're defending themselves, and they kill a police officer in the process of defending their own property because the police officers don't identify themselves, and you spend 10 years in prison. Great. Well, it looks like we actually do finally have our guest joining us. He's using another person's account in order to connect in. Had some technical difficulties, but I do want to welcome our guest here, Christopher Chase Rachel's, using Justin Stout's account. Welcome to Voluntary Virtues Roundtable.
Go ahead.
You're going to have to get closer to your microphone or speak a little louder. It's kind of hard to hear you.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
So I'm glad you have me on the show today, Robert. I know it's kind of a little bit of a short notice thing, but I'm glad we can do this today, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions you guys might have about the Blue Ridge Liberty Project.
Yeah, great. All right, well, first thing, though, I mean, as far as I know, you've not been on the Voluntary Virtues Network, at least not on the Voluntary Virtues Roundtable before. And we have a couple of questions that we like to ask our guests who, for the first time have appeared on the show, just to kind of get a background for, where they are, where they came from, and things like that. So the first thing I would like to ask you is, what was your history as far as your evolution into a liberty-minded person? Were your parents Republican, Democrat? Were you homeschooled? Where were your first introductions into liberty-mindedness? What sort of history do you have that brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. I'll try to be really brief because it could be kind of long. I grew up as a military brat, meaning my parents were in the military, moved around a lot. My dad was a self-proclaimed libertarian, but he was still all about, the DOD and all that nonsense. So I come from a very neocon background. I joined the military myself right after school in the Air Force, and I was an intelligence analyst. And during my tenure in there, I discovered Ron Paul, liked him a lot with the exception of his foreign policy. Then I read more and realized that was good stuff too. Became a pretty hardcore constitutionalist, and then eventually became an anarchist. And then as I got out of the military, I discovered people like Stephen Molyneux, Murray Rothbard, Hans-Werner Hoppe, and Kinsella, and they eventually led me to become a full-fledged free market anarchist. So here I am today. I've helped co-found the Blue Ridge Liberty Project. I run a YouTube channel now talking about free market anarchist or anarcho-capitalist issues and how they might be handled in the absence of a state. So I'm very happy to be here and looking forward to what comes in the future.
Great. Okay, and then another thing that we typically ask is, in your espousing of the movement for liberty, how effective have you been with your family?
Well, they all think I'm crazy, of course, like most of our families do. I think my mother is pretty generally supportive. My dad's, it's obviously none of them are anarchist, right? But I think I have moved them closer to liberty mindset. Like my mom, I convinced her to at least vote before Ron Paul, and my dad have made him become more libertarian in his positions. And most of the rest of my family is just pretty apathetic about it. But as far as my lifestyle is concerned and my current political disposition, I'm obviously a black sheep in relation to them.
Definitely. Well, as far as your friends and that you've been dealing with and trying to persuade them, which group do you find that is easier to persuade? I know that coming from a conservative background myself, that it's fairly easy for me to find common ground with the ideas of, if you have a free market, you have better products and better services. Result, as far as persuading them of the idea of having free markets in other things like the jury system, or the free market of policing, or at least certainly mail and probably roads and things like that. So I can persuade conservatives, but do you find that you can also persuade the people that you're dealing with who are liberal-minded?
Oh, yes. In fact, in Asheville here, I would say, at least in the city itself, it's a much higher proportion of leftists, liberals, what have you. And I have found it fairly, easy to persuade them, because instead of going from the free market base of reference, I go from the peace and tolerance base of reference. And so once you find that common ground, like libertarians, we're generally for the live and let live. We're not going to impose our moral standards on you. We're for peace against war, voluntary cooperation, and you approach it from that angle, and you show how if you universalize those ideas, how you also kind of show the state to be kind of incompatible with them. And once you kind of show them that's kind of incompatible with them, they're a lot more receptive to this whole idea of anarchy. And yeah, I've actually persuaded, I would say, a substantial number of liberals to at least be a lot more libertarian, if not anarchist. And the same thing with neoconservatives. It's just you use a different approach with each one.
Definitely. I find that you have to approach it from a completely different mindset. They just don't see the benefit of the free market competition stuff. They definitely prefer we want people to be happy, and we want people to be free to pursue what it is that their goals are, but they don't think that they are really free when they have to work within the capitalist system because of the big man pushing them down and so on. Yeah.
I even have a lot of videos, and I'm writing a book now. It's actually fully written. I just need to get it edited and formatted and then published. Most of it, I would say, is actually geared towards the left. Like, I got a few chapters which are probably more pertinent to the right, if you want to put in the left-right spectrum, meaning the chapters on private law and order and national defense. Those are more kind of geared towards the right skeptic. But most of the chapters are about things like healthcare, education, environmentalist issues, roads, and other kind of public goods like that. Externalities, corporations, the threat of monopolies and cartels. So I think that once you kind of show that a lot of these more salient liberal issues are actually more effectively dealt with through the free market, they become a lot more interested and a lot more open to these ideas, because you're not dismissing environmental issues, you're not dismissing the importance of education, you're not dismissing the importance of healthcare. You're simply showing how.
Looks like we're breaking up there. Hopefully Justin's connection will kick back in, and he'll be able to continue.
Humanitarian system.
Oh, well, lost you there for a moment there, Justin.
Chase. Right.
Right, Chase. I forget. Keep looking down at your thing, and I can't help it. All right, so
Okay.
Chase. So Chase, I understand Cody had some questions for you. So go ahead, Cody.
Yeah.
Hi, Chase. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely.
All right. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions. First of all, as far as the project is concerned, I'm kind of a visual guy, so I like to kind of just picture exactly what the process is and what's going on with it. So could you paint a picture a little bit as far as time frame and the actual specific actions that you've taken to do what you're doing and what you're doing there, et cetera?
Yeah, I'd be very happy to do that. So the genesis of the Blur Agility project comes back to late 2012. Justin and I moved up here from Columbia, South Carolina together. We scoped out the area first to make sure if this was the good place to set the project up, and we eventually decided that Asheville was, due to the kind of prevalent free-thinking, outside-the-box thinking culture here. People here are very peaceful. It's renowned for being very, quote-unquote, hippie-ish. You get a lot of very peaceful-minded, open-minded thinkers here, people who are willing to at least entertain such kind of voluntarist ideas. But even equally important to that, I would say, was the receptiveness to the ideas of peaceful parenting, which we think is an equally important aspect of our project to the volunteerism stuff, since we think it's through peaceful parenting that we're going to need to achieve a voluntary society, that it's at least an integral way to get there. Some of the things that we've done since we've been here, we've done many different anti-war protests. We've done pro-gun rights things, the Tea Party movement, anti-war with the Veterans for Peace. We've done cannabis awareness events for locals here who have been aggressed against the SWAT team, namely Todd Stimson. So we've done fundraisers for them, many different speeches. We've reached out at the local colleges here. We've gone to the local Students for Liberty conferences. We've gone to local Libertarian Party conferences and spoken there, handing out literature. We've also had like a lot of community events with our people who consider themselves to be part of the project. For instance, we'll have many different get-togethers, dinners, play volleyball, maybe teach a class about how to do something, whether it's canning or making kombucha, or maybe we'll talk about different like birthing stuff, since there's a big natural birthing and peaceful parenting community here. We've recently started doing things called empathy circles, which basically a group of us get together and share our feelings about how we're feeling about different things, and instead of trying to judge each other, we try to really empathize with where they're coming from. And we've learned over the past couple of years that through a more empathetic and compassionate approach, people are a lot more receptive to these ideas, because as long as they feel like they're being heard and you're really listening to them, then they're going to want to kind of listen to you. So it's kind of that reciprocal, mutual respect kind of idea going on here. Other events that we're planning on doing is a sort of pork fest type of deal, having an event here to where you have a bunch of liberty-minded people come out for camping together and sharing some thoughts and ideas and interacting with each other, maybe doing some agorism as well. And that's the other component here, is we also like to support the agorist community here. So we have some people who do hypnobirthing classes, others who make candles. Justin does online businesses and has a big advertising network to help advertise people's services. I mean, there's just a huge spectrum of things. We have other people who do like handyman work. So it's a wide approach. Basically, the only thing we don't do as far as activism is direct political activism, like trying to campaign for a certain person to go into office, and the more kind of instigating activism, like going up and trying to pick a quarrel with a police officer or whatever. So other than those two things, what we do as far as activism is concerned is pretty much everything that's peaceful.
Cool. So it sounds like your main objective so far has been outreach and activism and that kind of thing. Is the community is an end goal, might you say, to maybe secede or to create a pocket of, Anarchistan, if you will, for lack of a better term, an anarchist community completely, or is this strictly just a way for people to fellowship and kind of pool their resources for advocacy and that kind of thing?
Well, I wouldn't say it's an end goal per se, because that kind of implies that's like sequential, like we're building up to that. It's a very decentralized group, so we have many different people here who are free to choose what method they think is best to promote the ideas of voluntarism and peaceful parenting. But again, going back to your point, that is one of the things that we would like to do. In fact, we're talking about creating sort of permaculture village here, which would be kind of sort of like an enclave, kind of like what you were alluding to, where it could be like a community to where we could trade goods and services amongst each other, which I think would be very helpful for us, especially during what we believe that there will probably end up being an economic collapse in the near future. I think we all know it's mathematically not a question of if, but when. So we definitely do want to become much more self-sufficient and not dependent upon the status infrastructure here. But again, like I said, we don't have like a centralized command and control as far as what we're doing and what kind of activism we do. We just say, hey, as long as it's peaceful, as long as we're not like instigating the police and getting the state in our hair, or as long as none of us are going to be like promoting political campaigns under the banner of BRLP, then it's all fair game. And that kind of decentralized organization, I think, has really helped us come up with a lot of very neat ideas and really synergized our efforts in a very unique way and helped us, become a lot more creative. And I think people really appreciate that kind of autonomy, and I think it's very appropriate since we're all anarchists.
Right, that's cool. So you kind of alluded to some of this already, but because you mentioned not promoting government interaction, basically, or trying to change things through government means.
Right.
Could you maybe go into any other details that would differentiate you and what you're doing there with the Free State Project and what you see going on over there?
Yes, I'd be happy to. In fact, I don't know if you're aware of this, but since February to just about a week or two ago, I was actually living in New Hampshire with the Free State Project. So I've become much more familiar with what goes on around there. And the key differences is, first of all, the Free State Project per se, the only thing they really truly universally endorse is like less government, more liberty. So it's not really nearly as refined sort of goal or an idea. It's just kind of like more of a catch-all organization. And kind of under the umbrella, you have a lot of self-proclaimed free staters who do their own thing. But what I found when I was there is that probably the most organized and the most close-knit sects of the Free State community were those who were engaged in the political activism, right? Trying to get somebody in office. And what I think is different about here is that people who do consider themselves to be part of the BRLP were a lot more, do a lot more things together. A lot higher proportion of the people who are part of it participate in a lot of events. People here feel like not just an activist organization, it's also a community. And that's the other big part of it. We're not just doing this just for activism, but that is a big part of it. We also want to form a community, people we can support each other and rely upon, in the absence of maybe our own families who are very disenchanted or disturbed by our found ideas or lifestyles, So we're kind of just creating that family and community here for us. I think it's a very attractive prospect because most voluntarists across the country, they're like the only one in their town, or maybe they're one of two, and it's been really a beautiful thing to see as more of us come here, more of us get together, how the opportunities just kind of increase exponentially as far as what we can do with outreach, with our own community, and building a much stronger case for liberty, not just through the ideas, but through the actual real, tangible thing doing, whether that's the permaculture village or the community here or the peaceful parenting networks or what have you. So I think it's a really inspiring thing, and it's really transformed to something that I really never would have imagined could have happened this quickly.
That's very cool. Very cool. I think Matthew I do have one other question. I'll follow up with you later, but I think Matthew had something he wanted to. Go ahead. Matthew? Hello.
Yeah, okay. So thank you for joining us, Chase, by the way. So the question I have is, I was looking at the Blue Ridge Liberty Project Facebook page
Sure.
at one point, looking at through the what you allow or what you don't allow. I had a question with regard to my memory to what was on the list, somewhat fade. So the question with regard to what you would allow within what you consider proper within the non-aggression principle. Would you allow anyone who is overall peaceful within your community? Let's say someone who comes in and is a member of the non-denominational Christian comes in. Would you consider that person, as long as he's peaceful, does it bother you, generally whatever, within your community?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Matt, because there was a lot of confusion over that topic. Even though, as an organization, we're explicitly for promoting voluntarism and peaceful parenting, we very much encourage participating with other outside groups and other people who, even though they may not be explicitly voluntarist, or even though they may not be completely consistent with our ideas, we like to find other groups and other people out there who we can unite our efforts on common causes. And that's why I was talking about how we worked with Veterans for Peace, how we've worked with the Actual Normal organization, which is pretty much like a marijuana legalization lobbying group. But we work with them in areas that's not directly for like political advertising. We'll go to the Libertarian Party conferences to kind of introduce these ideas of free market anarchism, especially for those who are disillusioned with the political process. It's a good place to recruit. We've gone to the different colleges and their clubs, like the Students for Liberty, to try to kind of promote these ideas of peaceful parenting and free market anarchism as well. So no, we're not going to turn away someone just because they have a particular religious belief, especially if they're not doing anything that's aggressive. I would say the only time we would really want to explicitly disassociate ourselves with someone, a person or a group, is if they're actually explicitly advocating for aggression or if they're actually using aggression.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no problem.
So I did have one follow-up question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just kind of simplistic, but I'm having a hard time kind of visualizing exactly physically what's going on there. So are you basically inviting people to move into the area and then just as a way of getting closer to other people with like-minded philosophy? Or is there a specific plot of land that you are actually trying to sell parcels on, or what's the deal as far as the physical nature of what you're doing there?
Well, it's really all the above, right? So getting the land as far as the permaculture village, that's what's in the work. That is part of it. And we even have someone looking at like 15 acres of land and thinking about kind of selling parcels of it out to other people who want to live in the same community and thinking about a permaculture type of community and village. So yes, that's one part of it. The other part too is, of course, to have more people here to synergize more efforts to help promote the philosophy. The other part of it is also just to have that support network here for people who want to, especially peaceful parents. They want to be able to have someone who can watch their kid who they trust is aware of the different niceties of how you treat a child, what's going to be traumatic, what's going to be good for a psyche, are they going to be aggressive towards him. It also expands the opportunities for unschooling activities. Maybe one parent is especially knowledgeable in one area that one of the children in the community happen to be interested in, so they can learn from them, and vice versa. The other part of it is the agorist stuff. The more people you have, the easier and the more efficient it becomes to trade amongst each other. You have a greater division of labor. And of course, the more numbers you have when you're out in the community doing outreach to the general public, the more numbers you have, the more credibility your organization tends to get. So it's not one or the other. It's really all the above. And like I said, the only thing we're not is just promoting that political government activism and the more instigating type of activism.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, I have 3 kids myself, and I run a Facebook page called Unschooling, and
Oh, great.
it just boggles my mind sometimes how people can object to peaceful parenting and find it so complex when really it's just treating kids as if they're actual human beings.
Yeah, who are you to tell me how to raise a kid, And it's so funny. It's like, who are you to tell me how to raise my kid? That's my kid. It's like, we're not telling you exactly how to raise them. We're just saying just don't hit them. Just like we're not telling you how to treat a friend above and beyond. Just don't smack him or don't steal his property, It's just respect his rights. That's all.
Seems simple enough, right?
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, I think that's all I had for now, Robert.
Okay, well, I did want to kind of just pick your brain about some of the activities that you've done most recently as far as, trying to support their efforts. You said that you work together with different groups like unschooling or peaceful parenting and things like that.
Yep.
What are the most recent, ventures that you've been able to assist these people with in your most, recent activities?
Okay, well, really cool recent activities. We've really been helping Todd Stimson a lot here. To give you a little background on him, he was a local producer and distributor of cannabis here, but above and beyond just distributing it for recreational ends, he also was into distributing it for medical reasons. So he'd give the cannabis leaves for the cancer patients to put in their salads. He'd help this one guy, Ziggy, the juice and actually put his cancer into remission. He's researching different strains, developing different strains to really pinpoint which strains of cannabis can be geared towards treating which types of ailments. And he actually got incorporated through the state. He was very explicit about his activities. He even paid taxes on the plants themselves, which a majority of the funds for those taxes went to the very police office that ended up raiding his house with 40 SWAT people and assault rifles. So that's the most recent thing. We've been helping him promote awareness about that. In fact, they just did this walk from Western North Carolina here in Asheville to Raleigh. It was like a promote cannabis awareness legalization event. I forgot the exact name of it. A March Against Fear, I think is what it was called. And it got a lot of media attention. Other than that, we've also done an event today. There are some people, some of our members or people who are part of the organization here who attended a anti-war rally held by the Veterans for Peace. We work with them sometimes. We've done an anti-circumcision and pro-peaceful parenting protest recently. I mean, there's always events going on, so there's not like a primary thing we're doing because there's a lot of different avenues we're approaching at once. Like I think tomorrow we're doing an empathy circle, which is bi-monthly, with their own internal organization workings. So yeah, there's a lot of things. I could really go on and on about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now you also mentioned, or at least Matthew's question, kind of jumped in on this concept of the religious thing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the discussions that we've had here before is teaching your child about hell. The idea that if they don't do X, Y, or Z, that they will spend eternity being burned. Is that a violation of the non-aggression principle, and what would you do as a voluntarist if you found that there was a parent that was doing that?
Well, that's definitely a very big question, right? And this is where I kind of take off my BRLP hat and put on my Chase hat, you know. In my opinion, there's some gray area here, of course. I think we're all aware of that. If you're telling your child that an immediate consequence of, let's say, not believing in Christ as your Savior is going to be that when you die, you're going to spend eternity being tortured and just the worst kind of pain you can even possibly imagine for eternity. I mean, if you say that's going to happen and you have no objective evidence for this claim whatsoever, then yeah, I think that is a very clear and very horrific threat of violence against them. It's saying if you don't do this, you're going to burn for eternity. And even though it's not the parent who's saying that they themselves are going to be the ones who are doing it, they're still saying that you're going to burn in this imaginary place if you don't believe in Christ. And that's like, and I kind of make the analogy, it's like, okay, I don't have any evidence whatsoever there's a guy outside the room with a gun, but I tell someone, hey, look, you know, if you don't do what I say, this guy outside the room here is going to blow your head off when you walk out of the room. I'm not the one saying I'm going to do it, but, you know, there's some guy out there who's going to blow your head off. So to me, it's, especially with children, they're very susceptible to believing what you say because you're an authority figure in their eyes. You know, they don't have they haven't have a lot of experience with the world to be able to competently distinguish between fact and fiction. They're still figuring these things out. So especially for an impressionable child, I think that it is almost tantamount to a threat of aggression to teach them that they are going to go to hell if they don't believe in Christ. You know, so I would say yes, but I wouldn't say it's a definitive answer. But that's where I'm leaning towards, personally.
Okay, and then assuming that you know that this is going on, and let's say it's your next door neighbor.
Yeah.
What do you do about it?
Right. Well, that's another practical question, right? And I wouldn't advocate taking a child from his parent on those grounds alone, right? I might advocate ostracizing them or confronting them, and at least initially in an empathetic and compassionate manner, say, look, I understand you believe this is a real threat. I understand that you're just trying to do what you think is best for your child, but have you considered how this might be psychologically traumatic here? You don't really know for certain this is the case. And if he's very just totally unreceptive to any sort of approach like that, maybe resorting to ostracism, at least as far as you can do it in my community. Um, and above and beyond that, just spreading these ideas about rationality, objective evidence, reason, promoting peaceful parenting and showing how, yes, it is ethically correct, but there's also a lot of practical benefits of these things. So hopefully you can prevent this from happening in the first place. So yeah, on those grounds alone, I wouldn't advocate taking a parent from his child. I think that's not really very symmetrical,
Okay, and you also talked about the circumcision thing.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of discussion about the circumcision thing recently, and
Okay.
the idea was posed that let's say that we have a voluntarist society,
Mhm.
and a parent did circumcise their child
Mhm.
because the parents, both of them, in fact, the parents and the grandparents and the brothers and sisters, every person involved in this family is okay with this concept. There's no legitimate agency to make a claim. So then the result that we came up with as far as like how to kind of disincentivize this bad habit, this bad policy, was that if the child at the point of becoming independent and becoming a person who is responsible for their own contracts and things of that nature, wanted to sue their parents for the damages that were done to them through the circumcision process, could do so, and then we would see that parents would probably be have a good reason not to circumcise, and especially if the penalty associated with it was paying for the surgical restoration, doubly so, because again, common law typically asserts that you pay twice over what it is that the damages were caused,
Sure.
and also to pay for any sort of litigation process, whatever the costs were involved in that. So this might persuade parents not to do that kind of thing. Is that something that if you were the judge on that type of trial, what would you rule, and how do you see this as being an effective way of getting rid of such a barbaric practice?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that sounds reasonable, and if I was the arbitrator in that particular case, I think that paying for the cost of the surgery and also for psychological damages or the opportunity cost of not being able to enjoy the extra skin and those extra nerve endings, yeah, I think that would be a very appropriate ruling. But again, like, what's the specific consequences are? You can't really objectively say what's black and white, what is the most proper recourse. That's the whole point of having an arbitrating system, to be able to utilize the foundational principles of the NAP, property rights, self-ownership, what have you, as a foundation for the rulings, and from there trying to arbitrate through what your best opinion is, and not just opinion, but what you think will be the most acceptable to the greatest swath of society. Like, if it's a ruling that's unfavorable to everyone, no one thinks it's a good ruling, then you're not going to have your services patronized the next time. So under a private law system, you're trying to find a ruling that's going to satisfy all of its participants to the greatest degree, so you get the reputation for being a reasonable arbitrator, right? So that's kind of up to them to decide. We can't really say now what's the best specific recourse, but we can say that it is a violation of their right to their body to be physically intact, to the physical integrity of their body, right? And I know it's a long-winded answer. I know it's not very definitive, but I think there is a certain limit to this armchair theorizing you can do. I think that's the whole purpose of having these arbitration institutions and these social customs which develop as these problems arise. That's the whole benefit of common law,
Definitely. Also, you mentioned that you don't support political parties or political activism in so much as supporting a politician in their bid for a particular party or office and so on. So the question then comes up: what if, let's say, for the sake of argument, Adam Kokesh during his run for the presidency in the next election wants to come out to your neck of the woods? Would you be willing to assist him with setting up some sort of campaign dinner or some sort of speech or lecture that he might, put together?
Yeah, I think we would, because we wouldn't be helping him for the sake of supporting his political campaign, but more so utilizing his name recognition, the audience that he would bring, and knowing that whatever speech he would give would be assisting in spreading the libertarian ideas. It's kind of similar to Ron Paul. I would very much encourage anyone to watch a presidential debate with Ron Paul, not because I want them to vote for him, but because it's a really popular medium to where these ideas are being spread. And I know that might kind of sound like, oh, you're kind of on the fence here, you're kind of riding the fence. But really, it seems pretty clear to me. We just want to be endorsing him as a candidate. We'd be endorsing him as a liberty activist and endorsing the ideas that he's propounding, right? And I think it would be kind of foolish to kind of dismiss the utility of that, And I think that you can kind of separate his political endeavors with the ideas that he's supporting. I think you can do that without being inconsistent with your own principles, right? And finally, I don't, at least personally here, I can't speak for the group on this because I don't know if we even have a stance on it. I don't even think having a stance on it's necessary. But for me personally, I don't think there's anything ethically wrong with supporting a political candidate, especially if it's in self-defense because he's lesser evil. I just think it's not the optimal use of time, energy, and resources. I just think the opportunity cost of putting time, energy, and resources towards that are going to be higher and more costly than if you were to put those same time, energy, and resources to non-political means, namely means which are outside of the political system, like agorism, education, peaceful parenting, hacktivism, building your own community like the BRLP, that sort of thing. Because if you think about it, the political system is never going to be set up such that it's going to allow it to be disempowered from within. It doesn't really make any sense. It's not going to let that happen. Even its own supposed constitution, it doesn't follow, right? So why would it let itself shrink from within either? It doesn't really make much sense. Empirically, it's never really happened. Logically, it's not very. It's kind of an absurd idea. So that's kind of where I stand on that.
Okay, and it looks like that we've got one last question, which is another one that we ask of all of our guests that have appeared for the first time on Voluntary Virtues Roundtable.
Okay.
This is a kind of a tough question. I know that you may need to take some time to actually think about it, so go ahead and ponder this concept and then give us your answer. Assuming that you are on your deathbed, you're going to be dying here in the next 10 minutes, and you have the opportunity to get in front of the microphone and the cameras, speaking to the entire world and getting a huge audience. What is the final message that you would say to the populace that would, best get something through to them that you would really want them to understand?
Okay, wow. That is quite the question. Well, I think fundamentally, what's really important when it really comes down to it is we need to be really honest with ourselves. You know what I mean? If we're going to say we're for peace, we have to, with integrity, really think about the implications of that. They really like to say, look, I don't like violence, I don't like aggression, so let's universalize that. So that's the one thing. I would emphasize, try to really universalize those values which you claim to hold dear. Try to really apply them to every aspect of your life, and try to be honest with that. And I think the second and equally important thing with that too is try to see your fellow man as other actual human beings, not just these caricatures. That's not just the Palestinian guy, that's not just the statist guy, that's not just the communist person. This is another human being. It's someone's father or mother or sister or brother or son or daughter. And I think if you really are able to truly humanize your fellow man, that it becomes much easier to not fall into the traps of the propaganda, which is always trying to divide us. It's always trying to get us to accept these paradoxes, kind of like in 1984, war is peace, slavery is freedom, yada yada yada, and that's kind of ubiquitous in most of our thought processes. Like not ours personally, but like most of societies, because they have to be able to accept these paradoxes to keep supporting the state, to keep supporting a lot of different religious institutions, to keep supporting those unnecessary divisions amongst each other. So, yeah, bottom line, try to truly internalize the fact that we're all human beings, that we all have feelings, that we all have needs, and try to be honest and have integrity and universalize those values which you claim to hold dear. And I think if people really just did that would kind of sweep away a lot of the source of our tensions, our enmity with each other, a lot of the drama, a lot of the violence, a lot of the conflict, and bring us a lot closer together. And I know it kind of sounds like a beauty pageant speech or whatever, but I really do believe that with the bottom of my heart. So I think it's kind of the gist of what I would be preaching to the world.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on Voluntary Virtues. At this point, did you have any particular plugs that you would like to give for shows or events that you're doing that people who do see the show can look into, where they should go, for your Facebook or website or whatever?
Okay, sure. First thing is the Blue Ridge Liberty Project website, which is www.brlp.org. And just so you guys know, the website is currently receiving a huge facelift, so keep an eye out for that. My personal YouTube channel is youtube.com/ANCAPChase. That's ANCAPCHASE. I also have a podcast at firstdegreeliberty.podomatic.com. And finally, keep an eye out for my book. I'll be getting published fairly soon, probably within the next month or two. It's going to be called The Free Market Manifesto.
The Free Market Manifesto. All right.
Right. That's right.
Is it made in some sort of parallel to the Communist Manifesto as far as, chapter by chapter?
It's not quite that parallel. It's just kind of like the complete case, for the free market. And I'm sure we can discuss that at some different show if you'd like, in more depth.
Well, we would love to have you back, and certainly look forward to setting up some time to get together with you again within the next 6 months or so. We definitely would love to have you back to discuss your book and other things that come up during that time. So thank you again for joining us here on the Voluntary Virtues Roundtable. If you'd like to stay on and continue with the discussion of some of the news items that we're going to be going through, you're certainly welcome to do so. But if you have other activities that you need to go on to, then we certainly understand.
Yes, I got a new bar I'm going to help take care of, so I'm going to do that. But otherwise, I would have loved to stick around. But thanks for having me, Robert. It's really been a pleasure, and I do look forward to speaking with you again.
Absolutely, our pleasure. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay. By the way, are any of you guys members of the Blue Ridge Liberty Project? Or considering being members?
I didn't know about it till today.
Oh, really?
No.
Yeah, I thought that Mike had kind of somewhat of an association with them, or certainly friends that were part of it. He lives kind of in the neighborhood.
All these things seem to be happening on the East Coast, or at least seems East Coast from my perspective, because I'm in Portland, Oregon. And I kind of like it here, not going to lie.
Yeah. Well, the weather is a little bit wet, but other than that, I don't mind. I think it's kind of a little cold, though. All right, well, let's move on to some of the topics that we still have to cover. There was another article by Reason Magazine and a video that they put out over the federal judge ruling on last Saturday that the District of Columbia's ban on carrying firearms outside the home is unconstitutional. If you're not familiar with Emily Miller, works for the Washington Times. She's got a blog of her experiences there, and basically what happened for Emily was that she came home. She found that there was some guy who looks shady. He was leaving the general vicinity of her complex where her door was. She had left her door unlocked because she was going to walk the dog for about 10 minutes, so it wasn't going to be a long trip, and so she figured, whatever. She just didn't think about it. And so she asks him, what are you doing here? He says, well, I'm here for, to look at the pool. It's winter time. And anyway, the person ends up leaving after, excuses and so on. She goes in, finds her wallet has been emptied, no credit cards, no money. She kind of worries about this situation. She's got a dog with her that's completely inept for for a dangerous situation, and thinks, well, I want a gun, and goes through a variety of attempts to get a gun. Tries talking with the gun registration office, things like that. And she just has written article after article after article about her experiences that show how ridiculous it is to get a gun in D.C. And they had said that it was only possible it's only okay to have a gun, but as long as you keep it in your home, which of course is ludicrous because you're not going to be in your home for a very large percentage of the time, and certainly you can be accosted by a bad guy while you're not at home. So what's the point of having a gun if you can't use it when you're in a situation where you need it? Anyway, after it was like 4 months of headaches, hundreds of dollars in fees, she's now able to take her Sig Sauer 9mm and keep it in her home. Okay, then after that, she's then able to now finally, take it and carry it on her, at least unless it's appealed and then overturned again. So, yeah, any comments or questions about this particular article that we're talking about here?
Yeah, the first thing I thought of when I saw that headline was Adam Kokesh and all the crap that he went through for basically displaying a firearm on a video, nonetheless, that was allegedly in D.C. And he went to jail, and he had his house ransacked and all kinds of abuse put on him. And then this federal judge just basically overruled all that crap that he just went through, if I'm not mistaken. Now, it may be more specific than that as far as like a concealed carry permit or only small handgun or whatever. But it kind of got me thinking about any time that the government redacts anything that was once a prohibition. During prohibition of alcohol, there were people in jail who had their lives completely ruined for doing nothing but driving a car that happened to have booze in the back. They were transporting liquor from one place to another, and they'd have their whole entire lives upset, ruined. Fathers ripped out of homes, kids raised without a father, without a breadwinner. I mean, it was a terrible situation. And when Prohibition ended, fortunately, a lot of those people were actually released from prison. Hopefully, we can see that here with the end of marijuana prohibition. We can only hope, but there was really no way to compensate all these people who'd have their whole lives turned upside down. This is illegal one day, the next day it's not illegal. Yay for you, you're out of jail. Oh, sorry about the fact that you just spent the last 3 years of your life there or whatever. And that's kind of the first thing I thought of when I saw this article. It's like, well, all these people who have had all this crap put upon them because of this stupid law to begin with, and now a judge overturns it. It's like, well, too bad for you, the guy who's already in prison for doing the exact same thing that she wanted to do. So it's just another example of how ridiculously arbitrary all of these statutes are that the government puts upon us. You're muted up.
Sorry about that. Well, absolutely, it's the nature of the chaotic system that we live in, where you have a government that can make rules arbitrarily, can decide that one day it's this rule and one day it's this rule, and if you happen to be the sucker who got trapped in rule number 1 and then rule number 2 no longer applies, you may actually still be held in prison for a while. Certainly sometimes they will let you go, but they're not going to compensate you for having violated what is now considered a right to bear arms in the streets. Certainly you can look at the Adam Kokesh situation, and since he took a plea deal for whatever it was, odds are it's not what this law covers anymore, because it's probably a lesser charge, whereas this charge no longer would be valid. It's absolutely ludicrous. So the court actually enjoined the defendant's state from enforcing the home limitations of the D.C. firearms law unless such time as the District of Columbia adopts a licensing mechanism consistent with constitutional standards. Okay. Constitutional standards, the pieces of paper that are magical and have some sort of divine power that, quote, enable people to exercise their Second Amendment rights to bear arms. Yeah.
That the language there just kind of cracks me up, because there was no licensing. This document that they just referenced didn't mention anything about licensing, and then they use it as an excuse to establish proper licensing. It's like, what the fuck are you even talking about?
In fact, if you actually look at it, it prohibits licensing.
I'm pretty sure, knowing how constitutional law works, what they mean is whatever the hell judges say the Constitution actually says. It's not what in constitutional law, when you say something is constitutional, it's not, well, yes, it's loosely based off of the Constitution, but it's what the Supreme Court rules at any given arbitrary time, right, that the state is allowed to do. So in this case, the question is, would the Supreme Court, for example, say that the New York statute, and saying that they are, with regard to gun laws, are they constitutional? If they say so, my prediction is that Washington, D.C. would wind up making some type of statute similar to that of New York gun law statute, which are very, very, very strict to begin with, right?
Right. Well, I don't care what it is that judges say or what, even what the Constitution says. I have a right to self-defense, and if I use a tool that provides that ability for me to do so, then so be it. It's just the way it's going to be as far as freedom, what a person actually has a right to do. Now, if we actually look at the text, though, it's just absolutely very clear. The important part of it is the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and licensing infringes upon the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Okay, because the people who don't have a license don't have the right to keep and bear arms. Okay, now people will say, well, it's all about having a militia and all that kind of stuff. Bullshit. Okay, there's things called commas, and you know, the reason why we like the idea of having people being able to have the right to bear arms is so that they can join the militia to secure, you know, to secure a free state. You know, it says a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma. This is where the real stuff is. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You know, all that other stuff is all niceties. You know, it's kind of like the reason why we recognize this right, but it doesn't require that people actually be part of a militia or be creating a free state in order to have it. It's very clear. I don't know why it is that judges... Oh, yeah, I do know why. Because judges work for the state, and the state doesn't like people challenging them with guns. So maybe we could...
The reason why judges are lawyers for the government, so...
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're a government lawyer, your paycheck being funded by government, your incentive to rule in favor of them, so, or to defend whatever insane law that they come shoot down into law. So
yeah, and realistically, I mean, it all comes back from actually English history. In English law, it was a long-established natural right of self-defense. It's, you know, it's part of the right to life. You know, if you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, if you have a right to life, you have the right to defend people who would take that life, you know, defend against people who would take that life from you. So it's a very clear understanding that somehow gets all screwed up because people are beholden to the oppressors who are going to try to, you know, hurt us and what we're supposed to have guns to stop them from, you know, to doing.
Yeah, that's a part of the issue that a lot of people don't recognize, is that the gun issue isn't really the gun issue. It's the right to use tools to defend yourself issue. You know, if there were no such thing as guns, I might walk around with a tool belt on with a hammer sticking out the side of it, you know, beat yourself, you know, beat some dude over the head with a hammer if that's all there was. And if it's just a rock laying on the ground, you know, how can they say that I don't have a right to defend my life from somebody else? It's ridiculous. And the technology doesn't matter. You know, it's not it doesn't change the kind of philosophy when we're talking about the degree of the philosophy. So it's a ridiculous argument all the way around. It's kind of funny that you bring up the militia aspect too, because if you're only supposed to have a gun if you're forming a militia, well, good luck with that. Nobody in this country could own a gun if that was the case, because just try to form a militia, they will shut your ass down. So you'll probably have to join the military that works for the government, I guess, if you want to own a gun.
Well, no, because if you look at the definition, you don't, people who bring up the whole militia part, well, it's only for a militia, yada yada yada. What they don't realize is if you actually go back, and the definition of militia was defined very early on in the U.S. Code, and you can actually go and look it up. It literally is every able male citizen from the ages of 18 to like 44. Actually, maybe older than that. But every adult male was the definition of the militia. So, in law, in statute, so their entire argument becomes mute right then and there. You are the militia. I'm the militia. What yada yada. It's just where if we're to call up to service, would be called up by our state governor, right? So he's the head of the militia, quote unquote.
Absolutely, and you know, the idea that you know, a free society actually couldn't, you know, produce such a militia because it's us, is ridiculous as well, because we've already seen example after example after example in history of this happening. You know, the Roman Empire was actually taken down by militias. So there you go. I guess as far as this ruling goes, though, they're still going to fight this thing. We're still going to have a question as to whether or not you can actually have arms on your person in the city of Washington, D.C. to protect your life. We'll have to just see where it goes. My guess is that at some point they're going to get some other government stooge to say, no, that's not the way it works, and that right will go away again. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this this image that was shared recently, and we'll see what it is that we have to do. Take a look, see if this will work. Yeah, there we go. And I'm just going to go ahead and set it to focus on this. All right, so we have the Austrian business cycle theory. So it's a very bare bones explanation of the theory, and you know, it's a very complex idea, but it cuts it down to the bone. So let's take a look at it. Whether to consume or invest is a choice. You can't use the same money to do two things. Well, I don't like the false dichotomy here. To consume or invest is a choice. I think it's whether to consume, defer, you know, just to not act. There's a lot of different options, you know. So what you decide to do with your money is a choice, and you can't use the same money to do two things. Well, theoretically, no, but I don't know. You can kind of like make special deals where two things happen at the same time. You know, there's insurance companies that do investments for you and also do life insurance at the same time. Of course, it's kind of a conflation of things. But bottom line is, what do you think of this first point? That it's kind of creating an analogy or an explanation of the initial point of praxeology? Anybody?
Well, I think you're right that the deferment should be included in that, but it literally is impossible to do two different things with the same money. In the case of your insurance analogy, a portion of that money is going to investment, a poor investment, and a portion of it is going to the insurance company's pockets to provide your coverage. So it's still really not the same money, even though it may be one premium or whatever. So
yeah,
I'm not seeing a lot wrong with that, except for your observation that there actually is a third choice between investing and consummation, is that you could just do nothing, hold on to it.
Yeah, and theoretically,
which, you know, if it's Bitcoin, that is investing, I guess. But
theoretically, it is investing in some fashion, and I guess that you know, it could be a subset under invest. It's just a really dumb investment, right?
Yeah,
all right, so then
holding on to it, that wouldn't fall under investment. You're just saving it. You're doing nothing with it.
well, I mean, even if you put it underneath your mattress, if you have a currency that actually is like a real currency, like gold, then it is investing it in a manner of speaking, because it will increase in value over time, because the need for additional currency because of the population increase will occur. You know, it's one of the problems with having a fiat currency is that you don't have the natural progression of a currency increasing in value, making it a good choice to defer gratification, which benefits people. I mean, we are better off the more that you actually defer your gratification there. So let's see. There we go. And let's see here. Second point, the choice of how much to consume now and how much in the future is called time preference. Time preference determines interest rates, the price of borrowing money in the free market via supply and demand. Yeah, I suppose that that kind of clearly indicates what it is. Do you guys agree with that? That's a significant point in. Is it illustrated correctly in this explanation?
I think that the only way supply and demand works in that context is if there is a finite supply of money, which is probably what they're trying to get at here in the next steps. But if interest rates are determined by supply and demand, then that means that one of those must be static, or at least relative to the other. In our current fiat system, as demand increases, they just print more freaking money. So the supply always outpaces the demand, and that's how we get inflation. So looks like that's the next point.
Under here, it's trying to explain what normally happens
Yeah.
without all the government intervention bull crap.
Yeah, it does really kind of cut it down, and I think that a lot of people don't understand what time preference does to the interest rates and how it works. It is really, really brief here. The explanation as to how it works is not really that hard, but I think this is clear enough. It kind of gets it right. As far as an explanation as to how it works to people who are watching this video, to make it very clear, when you have a currency that is not dictated by a government agency and actually is using something like Bitcoin or gold or silver, then what will occur is that people will defer their consumption now, and they'll put this money into investments, whether it be investments in their own neighborhoods, by buying shares of a business that's going to get started, investing it in their own business that they're going to be seeking out, or they're going to put it into a bank, and then that bank is going to lend that money out into the business world, and then these businesses will use this money to finance the creation of additional production. Well, by doing that, number one, you've chosen not to buy stuff now and consume it, which means that later on, when you would like to consume, you're going to need that stuff to consume. And so your demand for consumption now is low, and your demand for consumption later is higher. By putting this money into investment, the production facilities that are going to satisfy that later demand are being built to satisfy that demand. So you kind of have like a sine wave that goes up and down, where you have savings, which means low consumption, which provides more capacity to provide for consumption, and then when your consumption need, your interest in actually consuming later occurs, well, now you've got the production to satisfy that. And then the inverse is true as well, that when you are not saving your money, and you're actually spending it on consumables like going on trips to foreign lands and whatever, you're not building things that are going to make more production. You're just enjoying yourself and having a good time, eating fancy foods, things of that nature. Well, that money is not being put into the market for increasing production, which you don't need, because later on, after you've spent all your money consuming stuff, you're going to need to save for a while. You're not going to just consume. At least it's not normal for people to do that. And so, as an aggregate, this is how it all mixes together. Is that by deferring consumption, you're providing the capital for those future consumptions that will occur. So then I guess the next point is central banks artificially lower interest rates in order to boost the economy, boost in quotes. Yeah, I suppose that's correct. It's their intent, but does it actually boost the economy? Anybody?
Well, when I studied monetary theory in college, they generally throw this idea out that the Fed's there to smooth out the business cycle. So lowering interest rates stimulates investment and so forth. But I liked Irving Fisher's the Fisher hypothesis, where it explains that in the long run, money's neutral. So just by creating money to lower interest rates, in the long run, you just get higher prices. So although interest rates in the short run it's a short run policy where lowering interest rates is a short-term effect. When the long-term effect is inflation cancels out any the prices go up such that it cancels out any temporary interest rate lower interest rate by that same amount. So in the end, in the long run, interest rates go back to where it was, replacing that lower interest rate with higher inflation. So thus, you need to adjust the interest rate. You need to add the extra inflation rate, and it cancels out any short-term effect. And in the long run, it actually just confuses the market because you're sending out mixed signals when you create more money, which should act as a ledger. It should correlate with the production. I mean, the money supply should stay relatively the same, so entrepreneurs have predictability as far as what the demand is out there, and demand, according to Say's laws, is determined by production capability. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's definitely the case in my mind that the reason why we have a continued high rate of interest in the Dow or in the various different things in the stock market is because of this short-term manipulation. And obviously, when it comes to the longer term, we'll see that after time, the effects will reverse and it become neutral again. And it's just a temporary kind of like momentary enjoyment, but when it is made neutral by the reality of how currency works, yeah. So they're definitely creating more problems than solving problems in my mind. Is there a case where you could see that maybe Keynes is right, that we need to have that kind of a stimulus to deal with these types of things?
No. In the end, they're just trying to. They're actually just confusing the market. So the only way to progress, the only way to accumulate wealth in an economy is through increasing production. And it's intuitive to us that creating money doesn't do that. It's just an illusion. It's a false signal to the market that production is increased, which makes people falsely invest in, which is like the malinvestment that Mises usually talks about. That's what I think he meant.
Can I jump in 1 second and
Absolutely.
say that sometimes when you talk about that and when you think about it, it almost sometimes feels like that these false signals, as they were, are almost sometimes being sent out on purpose. Now, that's just a conspiracy theorist in me saying that, well, why would it be done on purpose? Because there's no other, I don't think that you would ever purposely want to do that unless you can profit from it in some way. And certainly we've seen because of that the Federal Reserve and other even government institutions, profit from this like crazy. So I mean,
it's one reason. It's another reason for their existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they make you fear downturns, which they're the cause of, they're the cause of, then they actually kind of scare you into thinking that they're needed to smooth out the business cycle.
Well, and not only do they benefit from the fear factor of it all, but they actually profit from it. The way that inflation works, the people who have the money first win, because the later you get that money, the less it's worth. And the people who get it first are the big banks.
Exactly.
Well,
the big banks and government who usually issues the securities that the Fed buys.
Right, and they're issuing those at an earlier date than the consumer is ever able to have access to that.
Yeah,
that
plus
money,
the Fed earns I think a 6% dividend on their operations. So, I mean, yeah, of course, and they selectively choose.
6%?
I believe that's the figure. somewhat. You can confirm that by looking at their site, but that's open to the public. It's I'm not sure what the 6% refers to as far as gains or actual just their operations, but it's an interesting fact.
I think you said something very interesting there, Kenshi. That the idea that the way that you create wealth is by increasing production, and I would disagree. I think that the way that wealth is created is by creating product. But you create a faster growth of wealth. But the actual increase in wealth is the actual product. It's you're increasing the growth rate that wealth can be created.
It's kind of the same thing. You're talking about profitability and value, creating value, right? So you're trying to take resources and create a good that's of higher value to the market than the
Yeah,
raw resources.
exactly.
That's I mean, we're basically saying the same thing.
Yeah,
We're just crossing up definitions. Productivity, creating value, however you
yeah,
want to say it, but how technology plays a factor in that. But uh, yeah,
definitely. And I've also heard a mistaken claim that only humans can increase wealth, which is false. A environmental occurrence that might happen. Let's say that you have some sort of earthquake happen, and instead of having a marsh, you now have a cliff face where you have water that's falling and becoming, potable water, where it was not potable before, is now more wealth. We have a source of water that's reliable that we can enjoy the more usable water than what was there before. So, but yeah, it's basically whatever is of a higher value to a society, what is more usable, benefits the society more, therefore wealth is now existent. That's where wealth comes from, is by making either production more efficient so that it can now make things that people enjoy and value more. In itself, it's actually more valuable because it is more efficient. So yeah, it's kind of both, really. Anyway, let's move on to the next point. So then this makes borrowing money cheaper, so consumption and investment are both increased in the economy, and this is the boom stage. Sounds right to me. Anybody?
Well, that just sounds somewhat. I know you're trying to dumb it down, but I think it's somewhat even too dumbed down. Cause it isn't. Okay, we did make into here talk about making borrowing cheaper. This is true, but it doesn't explain why. I mean, I guess people can get it from the previous two if you put it together. But the reason why it's cheap, quote cheaper, is because it appears to be, or at least from the market point of view, that there is more money in the bank than there actually is. And this is why, and it gets somewhat even to the next few points, why is it that there is not enough resources needed for the economy? What's happening is producers are borrowing more money that are it's actually borrowing capital because of the cheapness of it, and the long run, so they're preparing for consumption in the long run, when in reality people are demanding, trying to consume in the present, and they're demanding goods in the present. This is really what this next point, the last point actually gets to. But I think it's somewhat a little too dumbed down. I think and probably could have got into why it's cheaper. Because it appears, because it's artificially, the interest rate has been artificially lowered. It appears that there's more money than there actually is.
Yeah. So you're saying that by breaking this into such integral points, that they're making it more difficult to understand. Is that your assertion?
Well, I wouldn't say it necessarily more difficult. To some degree, it's just not. Let's see which word to get. I just think it's a little bit too dumbed down. It doesn't get into. I mean, I get why it's okay to simplify things, but I don't think you should simplify it so much that you leave out the why it's being cheap, why the cheapness happens. I don't think they.
Well, they
I
said
don't think
why
they
on
can
the
actually
previous,
necessarily get that from the previous point.
they said why on the previous step though. They
You,
said that it is artificially lower, so it's a fake.
yeah, because if you can see the factors that can lower interest rates naturally, right? I think one of them is actually production, if I remember right. Uh, but you can lower you can technically lower interest rates by increasing the money supply if the price level stays the same, and that's a big if. The thing about this whole Austrian business cycle theory is you can understand it better if you just remove the money. Because in the end, I'm of the believer that money's neutral, right? It's just a veil. It kind of makes everything more complicated in the analysis than it should be. So you can actually look at this analysis, take out the money, and it'll be much simpler. So as far if you want to simplify it, but I'm actually gonna, I'm not I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about this now or wait till the end of this wait till the end of the point because it has to
Well,
do with.
we can certainly go over that in the after hours, and we can bring it back up then if you'd
Yeah.
prefer.
But yeah, just to simplify, you can look at this without money, and it'll actually, if you just look at things in a barter economy, you'll understand this much better because the money is just noise. It's just a noise. Technically, it isn't. You could use it as an asset, but it's just in a free market, money's just it's neutral in the long run.
Well,
It really
all it is a facilitation of the
of
barter
exchange.
process.
Yeah. So
Realistically,
it's a lubrication to the system, but uh, other than its lubrication, it does not serve as to increase the productivity. I know it increases efficiency, yes, but in the end, if you were to pretend that you didn't need money, it does not make a it shouldn't make a difference whether or not uh, you increase the money supply or decrease the money supply. That's in a free market, but when you have a central authority issuing the currency, of course you can utilize it to your advantage. But you can, if in the after hours, maybe we can go back through this, or we can actually go through a simplified version of this.
Can I just ask you one question before we move on, specifically for you, Kenchi? This is slightly off topic, but in a truly free market, would a third-party currency like Bitcoin be completely a moot point then?
As far as the choice of what money is, well, I'm an advocate of Bitcoin, right? So maybe I could talk about that too, because I want to talk about.
I want to hear what he has to say about that, especially in the after hours. Then, so my bad.
Yeah, no. As far as the choice of money, that's purely up to the market. So, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, we'll go over that as well in the after hours. Certainly, you guys both stay on with. I'll get out the link to that so you guys can join in. We'll talk about those details, and then as far as just evaluating this particular meme, I guess, or summary of the Austrian business cycle theory. Yes, I guess we do see that there's this artificial lowering of interest rates that makes borrowing money cheaper. So then there's misallocation of either consumption or investments just because of a misunderstanding, and then then we have the next point, which is it's not possible to both consume and invest with using the same set of resources. Obviously, that's true, right? You're not sure?
Well, it's like that's the thing about admittedly, economics is not my my major forte, but it's like it's something that I get the basics of, and I've learned a lot from the voluntary movement, the anarcho-capitalist movement, but I would say that I think it is possible to do both in a very broad sense of the term, because maybe I'm wrong, and if I'm wrong, feel free to shut me down, correcting me. But I mean,
It's talking about every unit of money. So a unit cannot be both used to do two things at once.
okay, that makes much more sense
Yeah.
to me.
And I think it's pretty clear that it's accurate. I mean, if you spend $1 for a hamburger, or you spend $1 for a screwdriver,
I guess that dollar can't go both ways.
Yeah.
I guess I was looking at the wrong way, where I would say, well, if I spend that dollar for that hamburger, I'm technically investing in the hamburger company because they can take that money and, use it to make more hamburgers. So,
But that's the
I
next
guess that's where I got it wrong. So, my bad.
Yeah, that we're talking about each individual incremental step. Yeah. All right. So then this means not all the resources needed are available. Not every business can complete the projects they invested in. The bust occurs. Wow, that's a pretty big jump. I think that they're missing a step here, maybe.
And what step is that?
That it doesn't explain why it is that the bust happens. That that there's a competition for the consumption and investment dollars that are being injected into the system, and that you have to achieve a certain final point of completion when it comes to investment. Investment has to fully be paid for before it is actually pans out to achieve its goal. So, for example, a business wants to make a new production facility. They buy some machinery. They buy some land. They buy some building stuff. The concrete and so on. And the scaffolding is put up. The roofing is put on, and then now the money is no longer available because the government is no longer interfering in the market the same way. And the reason why it broke at that point in the cycle was that you had both consumption and investment at the same time. Now, normally you can have this type of a break occur at any point, whether you have a government interfering or not. These types of things can happen, where you'll have an investment kind of go sour halfway through, but it happens a hell of a lot more often when you can't predict, when you have a government interfering in creating artificial interest rates, where in a free market you actually can predict that, yes, all right, we are seeing these rates of consumption, we're seeing these rates of for interest and so on, so you can plan ahead. So the not explaining why it is that that some businesses will not complete the projects that they invest in, and where the break occurs is because the central banks stop artificially lowering interest rates. That is a critical element, I think, that this thing is missing. I mean, that is what causes this break to happen.
I think you made a good point, Robert, in the one word that you used, predictability. Because if it's being artificially manipulated, that by nature means it's very unpredictable. But most markets are actually very predictable. I mean, this stuff, shit happens, of course, but like look at insurance, for instance. The only reason insurance companies can make money legitimately, I mean, there are a lot of ways they make money not legitimately, but insurance companies as a viable business model because people en masse in big numbers are predictable. They know what the hell's going to happen. They know they can insure the value of your car on the road or whatever because they know exactly how many of those cars are going to get in accidents next month. They know this shit because, like I said, humans in large groups are predictable. And I think you raise a really good point there as far as economics and investment is concerned. Imagine how much more people would invest if they had that sort of knowledge base that an insurance company does. If you could invest in a company and where the industry's been, where it's going, and it's gonna, and that predictability is there, that's a massive incentive for you to be able to invest. Whereas right now it's freaking lottery. You put your money in the stock market and you just have no freaking clue what's about to happen.
A lot of the those last two points on that flow chart, whatever it is, it's kind of missing. It's kind of confusing because it kind of restricts the mistake into uncompleted projects, which is misleading. It should really say it's all about profitability, right? So what the Fed does when it creates money, it sends a false signal of demand out there. It sends a false signal of demand slash productivity out there, like it produces goods that it's willing to trade. So uh, whatever goods that money buys, that new money buys, uh, that producer who wouldn't have produced it otherwise thinks there's a demand out there for it, when actually there isn't. So it's actually just a question of printing money causes them to take on ventures that were not profitable. It creates the illusion of profitability, whether it's completed or not. They can complete the project and they'll realize it's not profitable and they'll lose money, or they can figure out, you might as well cut my losses here and just limit losses, and it's not profitable that way too. But that completion part should really be taken out. It kind of restricts it where people start overthinking it to be uncompleted projects. No, I really think completed projects, but it's all about false signals and false demand and non-profitability. So it it fools the producers into producing something they wouldn't have otherwise, that they thought was profitable, uh, because they haven't factored in the price change. They haven't factored in the money supply growth. They think that new money is production, well, when it's not. There's no production behind that money. It's a violation of Say's law. Supply is demand, right? In the long run, there's no gluts. So what they're creating is a demand with no supply to back it up, and that's the critical point about the Austrian business cycle.
Government.
Yeah, the point that Kenji brings up is quite salient. Say's law. If you could actually clearly explain what Say's law is to the audience there, Kenji. A lot of people don't understand what it is and how it actually interacts with the real world.
Yeah, there's different ways you can phrase it. So I know it intuitively. So you can phrase it as unlimited wants are restricted by your productivity capacity, right? Supply creates its own demand. I think that's the casual way of saying it. So that they're essentially the same thing in a free market, right? So you can want something, but you cannot actually consume it until you produce something of equal value to the market to trade for it. So every unit of production represents also demand and vice versa.
Right, and the other thing is that it's not just units of production; it's units of production of value. You could produce all sorts of crap.
Yeah, that's how you quantify it. You can quantify in dollars usually in economics or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of like what I mean. It's all arbitrary on what unit you use to measure.
Yeah, but you have to have produced something of equal value in order to have the consumption for the thing of value that you're going to trade for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so a lot of people don't get that. And what happens with this artificial inflation of the actually deflation of the interest rates that occur, it creates a belief that there's actually this stuff that's actually been made for trade in order to, and it doesn't exist. There's not.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was trying to get to. You can simplify this whole thing, because people usually, when they go through these thought experiments, they think of a large economy with millions of actors, but you can really simplify this by removing number one, money, and simplifying it to two individuals. Let's call them Government and Robert, right? So you can, and if you just do a two-person exchange, and you can see that if government promises production in the future for your production now, and he's just lying about it, in the end, when that guy tries to redeem that coupon, that's when the bust occurs. And that's the very simplest way. These desert thought experiments are very valuable when you want to understand these cycles, or how these explanations are kind of convoluted. You're trying to think of it in the real world as far as millions of actors with money involved. when you remove all those, you see clearly where that malfunction happens and
Kenji,
why
you
the
should
bus
have your own show.
Yeah, well,
By the way, Robert, I
I'm-
will note that I think me and you were actually observed the same thing being missing. I think we just agreed as to where it should be.
yeah, okay.
I was just thinking about that. So,
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
yeah,
that,
I can make a whole case about profitability. I mean, I'm a believer that profitability is actually the moral compass you should use, and it all comes back to the survivability. But I'm not going to get into that.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's a totally different thing, but
Yeah.
we'll talk about that during the after hours.
Very related.
Just want to say to Samao Gomez, hey, what's up? I don't know. We're just talking about good stuff, and certainly if you want to interject some comments on what it is that we're talking about, feel free. All right, so let's see. At this point, we're going to go ahead and I guess we'll have further discussion of that particular meme on the Voluntary Virtues After Hours show. There's certainly a little bit more that we need to go over as far as some of the ideas that Kenshi has about profitability being a essential tenet of truth, and we're going to look into whether you use money or not. But I understand that there's this article that we have about Mogadishu, and I'm going to go ahead and throw that over to Cody to drill the round table and talking about what's going on with this particular article that you can check out.
Yeah, so basically what's going on is in Mogadishu, it's been pretty much a standard operating procedure to have to bribe local factions of militants in order to stay in business. If you're a business owner there, they come in and they rough you up and they take your money. And, mafia style. Well, there's been a relatively peaceful period in Mogadishu for a little while now, and so businesses are actually starting to prosper. There's some progress happening because the militants aren't there. So the next militant has to step in, which is their own government and their own mafia, and try to come in and start taxing these businesses. Well, they're not used to paying taxes. They're not used to getting any government services to justify those taxes. So they're basically all saying, "Screw you. We're not going to pay you." A lot of them are just ignoring the tax collectors. But there's actually been 5 tax collectors that were killed trying to collect taxes from these business owners. Now, the part about this article, there's 2 things I thought was just hilarious. One of them is kind of what I described here. It says, a fragile peace has fallen over the city, allowing new construction and business opportunities. Government tax collectors began work for the first time as tax evasion remains high. So the article is actually trying to justify that these people really should be paying taxes if they ever want hospitals and prosperity and anything, but they contradict themselves with that statement, because as soon as peaceful interaction was available, the prosperity began to happen. I mean, this is such a perfect example of how of spontaneous order, right? As soon as there was not the gun in the room and this force taking place, people began to prosper on their own. They don't need the freaking government to come in and set up roads and hospitals. And that's basically what these people are saying to their government. The other point I just wanted to put out is it gives the excuse that says that one reason they don't want to pay taxes is that they're just so aware of all the corruption. It said something about $16.5 million that was collected in taxes last year. 12 million of it went to the personal pockets of people stealing it that worked in the government. And just imagine what their solution to that was. This is just hilarious. It says, corruption is so pervasive that it will be difficult to stop, says Abdi Anti, the director of Mogadishu think tank called the Heritage Institute for Policy Studies. He said the government must institute an anti-corruption, I don't know if I can get through this with a straight face, the government must institute an anti-corruption commission that has powers to investigate and must enact policies that encourage transparency and accountability.
And who's going to maintain this This little collective here of investigators.
The same fucks that are stealing all that money to begin with. It's just hilarious. The whole article is just, it seems like satire, actually. But
Excuse me, Cody. I've
yeah.
investigated myself, and I've found that I've done nothing wrong. So,
Oh. Well,
Well,
as
it's
long as you're
turtles all the way-
transparent about it.
It's turtles all the way down. We've got to have these guys to oversee these people who are in power, and then well, who's going to oversee the overseers? Well, we're going to have to oversee them with an overseer group for transparency and oh, jeez, it's absolutely stupid. So, what else was it? Is that everything on this?
That was pretty much the article. But I did think it was really interesting how they almost slipped up and made a point against their. This whole article kind of advocates the government and how bad these taxpayers are, how stupid these people are for not wanting to pay taxes and get roads and hospitals. But they almost slipped up with that one paragraph when they say that as soon as peace came into the neighborhood, opportunity was available. Like people started to prosper. It's like, ooh, duh, The government wasn't there for that. The government didn't do that, as Obama said. They didn't do that. Well, yeah, they did actually, all by themselves, because the government wasn't there yet. So the government's basically this lapdog that's pretending to lead the hunt, but the people going their own way. The lapdog comes back. Oh, wait a minute, I'm leading this charge.
So I'm looking at this article, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't say how these 5 tax collectors died. Were these people just shot because they were tax collectors, or were they pulling guns on people who then were defending themselves? Because if they're just being shot because they're tax collectors, shame on them. That kind of goes against, in my mind, that goes against the voluntary.
Well, let's put this in context. The previous tax collectors were Islamist
basically
militants.
Yeah.
They were Islamist militants. So when these people are getting a reputation in their small town, I'm assuming you probably recognize one of these guys. Oh, that's a tax collector. Shoot him. This is like he's going to come after us, and it actually has. They basically are armed at this point because of the aggression against the tax collectors. They're traveling around with armed guards now, and the armed guards are threatening the business owner. Says, you don't pay us taxes, we're going to shut down your business right here on the spot.
Well, like I said, good on them for ignoring the taxmen, but just shooting.
That's like proved. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say good on them for ignoring the taxmen, but if they're shooting these people unprovoked, especially in the beginning, then shame on them for that. That's all I wanted to put out was, violence is still violence, self-defense or not. It's a little sad that these people had to die because they were doing a government job. Now, was it legitimate? No, but these are still people. They still probably were doing this tax collection job to feed their own families, and that's a little sad. So
it is a little sad, but at the same time, the store owners are basically just recognizing these guys for what they are. They're armed thieves.
Yeah.
And I'm going to shoot an armed thief if he comes into my house. So there you go.
Again, I investigated myself, and I found that I did nothing wrong. Thank you.
Well, right. It really showed government for what it is. It's the mafia. Here you have a previously. I love this article for several reasons. One of which is Somalia is supposed to be an anarchist system, but here we're talking about now a government that is being forced upon the Somalis. And I guess I remember there was a talk. I think it was the Reed's organization. I think it is. Can't remember. Oh, they had talked about before with regard to anarchy in Somalia and how it was before Somalia and whatnot, back in the Clinton administration and whatnot. You had periods of peace, but every time you actually look at where violence actually took place, it always took place A in the capital and B every time outside countries like the UN or Europe and what have you tried to impose the government on the Somalis. Considered what they're doing, they're opposing the government that comes in. Every time you have violence happening that goes up, or that really goes up, it's always when government is being imposed. But what I love about this, or I find the article quite comical as well. Toward the end, hold on, where the hell did it go? Oh shit. No, I think I lost it. Toward the end, it talked about the tactical. Sorry, here it is. It's right after it talked about the yearly $135 fee, which actually I wish the fee was that daggone low here, right? Relative high actually for them. But quote, taxing is really challenging here because some people don't want law and order, quote unquote. Excuse me? Didn't we just come out of a period of relative order and peace, and you're here trying to, well, steal from us. So he's here not wanting law and order. It isn't the tax rebels, it's government. It's quite, the irony is really showing here. They don't want law and order because they don't want to be stolen from. Then it goes on to talk about stealing from government itself. So, I'm sorry, large-scale theft of government funds takes place at the central bank of the Mogadishu port.
Well, obviously, we can see that it's no longer an anarchist, bastion of anarchy. But even then, it wasn't a bastion of anarchy. Before then, yeah, I don't know. It kind of was. There were different warlords who were in charge of different areas, and people were actually figuring out, yeah, you can fight the warlords. You've got guns. Just go ahead and tell them to fuck off. But certainly, with this new administration that's now around and them trying to tax everything, and obviously we've got a government there now, so it's no longer anarchist at all. But I think that at this point we're going to have to go ahead and wrap things up. If you'd like to, hear more about the Mogadishu scenario and our additional thoughts on the Austrian business cycle, also
And
we're
beer commercials.
and beer commercials. I don't know if we're going to do the beer commercial things, but we're going to talk about doing we're going to talk about advertising and so on. Certainly, come back to the Voluntary Virtues Network homepage and join us on the live event there, which will be starting here in about a minute. Again, thank you for watching the Voluntary Virtues Roundtable. This has been your guest host, Robert Kruger, and thanks again to all of our wonderful roundtable participants for joining us tonight. Take care. Have a great day.